Okay, all right. Well, today we return to 1 Samuel chapter 25. And this is kind of a challenging text tonight because we're going to look at this and see, I don't know, if we're tempted to take somebody's side, whether to look at good, the actions, whether they're really good actions or not. There's things that happen in this chapter 25 that really don't seem like they're really very godly choices that are made by many of the people involved in it. But we're going to look at it, and I want us to look at it in terms of this. When we have disagreements in our life, and whether it's in the church or in personal relations that we have, what do we do to restore those? What can we do to fix those things? So in the world that we live, if you have a problem with somebody and you want to settle that, there's like 3 steps in the process, 3 different ways of doing that. And the first one is mediation. Mediation means you and I have a problem and we're going to hire a mediator, and that means somebody is going to come and sit with us, and they're going to help to try to find an agreement. We can find a place that we can agree on it. Now, there's nothing binding in the sense that mediator does not have the authority to generally to say, well, we're going to side with you. Their purpose is to bring us to agreement. Now, what's the purpose of that? Why is a mediator preferable to what other options might be? Would you say they're neutral? Okay. What else is the advantage of and maybe before I get to the advantage of it, maybe I need to say what the other options are. And one of them next would be an arbitrator. Now, an arbitrator comes in and they're sitting in the same thing. There's the 2 parties that are at disagreement, and the arbitrator is going to listen to your problems. You're going to talk in the same way and discuss and try to understand and find common ground, same way the mediator does. But the arbitrator is then going to be given the authority to make a determination, to choose for one side or the other. So if you know that about arbitration, then why might you want mediation instead of arbitration? Why would you want to avoid arbitration? Betty? They might decide against you. That's right. And so you have something to lose. In Major League Sports, people will sign contracts, and then if they can't agree on a contract, they'll go to a mediator, and they want to avoid arbitration because they know once it goes to arbitration, it's out of my hand, and whatever that guy decides, then that's what I got to be happy with. And so arbitration avoided. Now the final is litigation, and litigation, that's when you're going to go to a court of law. There's going to be a judge, there's going to be a jury, or a judge or jury, judge and jury. And again, you have now completely lost any input into what the outcome might be. And so for that reason, mediation always, or I shouldn't say always, but generally is what's preferred. If we can agree on this, then we don't have to give it to somebody else who makes a determination that might not be what we really would want. And so mediation is what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to look at this woman named Abigail, who's going to become the mediator in this disagreement between David and Nabal. And so beginning there at verse 1, kind of interestingly inserted into this, and interesting in this way, it seems like one of the most important verses in the book of 1 Samuel, but it is completely without any other context. There's information before, and there's a new story that follows after, but this verse in itself seems incredibly powerful and important in the scripture and in the life of Israel. Verse 1, now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him in his house at Ramah. And so what follows after that, maybe only in some small way, has anything to do with the death of Samuel. So what I was going to say is that David goes to the wilderness at Paran. Maybe it has this to do with it, that now that Samuel's out of the way, maybe there's a concern that now nothing's going to restrain Saul. That maybe Saul's going to come at him full force, even though it seems like he's been doing that already. But Samuel has died, and this main character of 1 Samuel, this person who is going to be the last judge of Israel, and really the first prophet in Israel, is now gone. And so in some way there seems to be this kind of interesting transition here, and it is that Saul was named king, of course, anointed by Samuel. David, following after God declares that Saul will not keep his kingdom, David anointed as the succeeding king. And so Samuel, kind of that in between, that transitory person in the kingdom. And so kind of an interesting thing is that if you remember at the end of chapter 24, Saul said something that Saul hadn't said before. You remember what it was in regards to the kingdom and David? That David was going to be king. Saul acknowledges that at the end of chapter 24. And in the beginning of chapter 25, Samuel's dead. And so there seems to be maybe, in that sense, what Samuel's purpose was up to this point. What Samuel is there for is no longer needed. Now it's been acknowledged. Saul is not going to be king, and David is going to be king. And so at that point, the scripture simply says, and Samuel died, and everybody mourned. Now, do you think, and this is speculative because all that the end of chapter 1 says is then David rose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. So do you think David went to the funeral? Just based on what we know about Saul and David and history, do you think David went to the funeral? Probably not. Probably not. I mean, that would have made him a pretty easy target. So probably not, but we don't know. We don't know for sure. But regardless, after this happens, David heads to the wilderness, probably with more concern. Okay, Saul's going to really turn up the heat at this point. So then David rose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. And there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel. The man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. So this guy is successful. Now, we can look around our community and we would look for our goat herders, our goat farmers, and we've got the Lane Farm just out the road here. What's the number of goats in your 2? You got more than 2 goats. Really? How about the Duval Farm? 10? 9. 9 goats at the Duval Farm. So Nabal is the Duvals of his day, okay? And so with 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. The woman was discerning and beautiful, but the man was harsh and badly behaved. He was a Calebite. Now, a Calebite means what? It means he's a descendant of Caleb. Now, Caleb isn't one of the families of Judah, not one of the tribes of Judah, but he would be a descendant of that, being Caleb, who was prominent in the conquering of the Promised Land. And so, verse 4, David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. And thus you shall greet him. Peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. I hear that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time they were in Carmel." So David's got this army in the wilderness, and so how are they providing for themselves? What means do you think they're providing for themselves? They're basically what? They're foraging. They're basically just they got to kind of get what they can off the land. sort of like what we would have seen maybe during the time of the Civil War, where they would be in a predicament, a situation where they just had to live off the land that they conquered. And so that's sort of the position they're in. And so they go to Nabal, who has the means to help them, and they point out some important things. First of all, we aren't doing anything to harm your business. In fact, there's even the indication that it's beneficial. That David being there is of value to Nabal and his men. Now, why might that be? Let's remember the stories that we've walked through in the last few weeks. Yeah, protection. The idea that the Philistines are coming in and randomly ransacking villages and towns, and that seems to be happening pretty often. And so the fact that this whatever 600-man army is present is probably of benefit to Nabal. And so David points that out. Look, you are benefiting from the fact that we are here. And so verse, where are we at? Verse 9? Verse 8. Ask a young man, and they will tell you. Therefore let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David. So they're asking for a handout. They're asking for help. Verse 9, when David's young men came, they said all this to Nabal in the name of David. And then they waited. And Nabal answered, David's servants. Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? Now, do you think Nabal knows who is David? Do you think that's a question that he's asking sincerely? No, he knows who he is. How do we know he knows who he is? He is. Yeah, he's the son of Jesse. He knows something about him. So he's aware of David. And I'm sure the fact that David and his army are in this area, that they're very well known of at that point. And so, but he's in this mocking tone. Who's David? Who's the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men who come from I do not know where? Again, I'm certain he knows where. That he knows where he's from. So David's young men turned away and came back and told him all this. And David said to his men, every man strap on his sword. And every man of them strapped on his sword. David also strapped on his sword. And about 400 men went up after David, while 200 remained with the baggage. So what are your thoughts at this point? First of all, what's David about to do? Kill everybody, right. So what are your thoughts on that? Did the actions of Nabal at this point in the story, do you believe, did it justify massacring Nabal and his family and his herdsmen? Seems a little like a little overreaction, doesn't it? I think a little harsh at this point. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to greet our master, and he railed at them. Yet the men were good to us, and we suffered no harm. And we did not miss anything when we were in the fields, as long as we went with them. So from the messenger's perspective, how does it sound like he thinks about these things? How's he feel about David and his men? Yeah, they're speaking favorably of them. They were a wall to us, both by night and by day, all the while we were with them keeping the sheep. Now, therefore know this and consider what you should do, for harm is determined against our master and against all his house, and he is such a worthless man that one cannot speak to him. And so they recognize the problem, and part of the problem isn't simply the overreaction to David. It is that there's no talking to this guy, that you know what Nabal's like. In fact, the fact that they would go to his wife would tell us what? About Abigail. The fact that Nabal is about ready to incur the wrath of David and his horde, and the one that they go talk to is Abigail, tells you what about Abigail, Betty? They have respect for her. They see her as a voice of reason in this moment of insanity. Verse 18. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves and 2 skins of wine and 5 sheep already prepared and 5 seahs of parched grain and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs and laid them on donkeys. And she said to her young men, "Go on before me. Behold, I come after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. And as she rode on the donkey and came down under the cover of the mountain, behold, David and his men came down toward her, and she met them. Now David had said, "Surely in vain have I guarded all this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him. And he returned me evil for good. God do so to the enemies of David, and more also, if by morning I leave so much as one male of all who belong to him." When Abigail saw David, she hurried and got down from the donkey and fell before David on her face and bowed to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "On me alone, my Lord, be the guilt. Please let your servant speak in your ears and hear the word of your servant." And so what role has Abigail just taken on? The mediator. She is the mediator. She is that which is going to come between David and Nabal and an attempt to divert what the tragedy that's about to be that's about to happen. Verse 25, "Let not my Lord regard this worthless fellow Nabal." So this is Abigail speaking. This is how she refers to her husband. "For as his name is," and the name Nabal actually means fool, "and folly is with him. But I, your servant, did not see the young men of the Lord whom you sent. Now then, my Lord, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, because the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt, and from saving with your own hand, now then let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my Lord be as Nabal. And now let the present that your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the trespass of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in you as long as you live. If men rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living in the care of the Lord your God. And the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the hollow of a sling. And when the Lord has done to my Lord, according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you prince over Israel, my Lord shall have no cause of grief or pangs of conscience for having shed blood without cause, or for my Lord, working salvation himself. And when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your servant." Now, when she speaks there, and she's speaking of